After failing to unite the Arab world, Gadhafi shifted his focus from pan-Arabic unity to pan-African unity, envisioning the United States of Africa. A force that I believe must and will shape the African continent. Perhaps not led by government as Gadhafi envisioned, but by something beyond government. However, that's a topic for another day. Let's return to Gadhafi. Gadhafi's vision for the Pan-African Union was straightforward: to unite the African continent under a single federal government, similar to the European Union. It aimed to promote African unity, economic cooperation, and political integration, leveraging the continent's vast resources for the benefit of her people. This included setting up continental institutions, notably a central bank with a single currency used across Africa, from Tunisia in the north to South Africa in the south. All this backed by a continental army, an African force that would rival the might of the United States. Experts argue that an African currency would not work due to Africa's mismanagement of the three major economic factors: interest rates, inflation rates, and the stability and growth. But I believe this currency could have been the solution to fix how Africa manages those factors. I will let Colin break it down. Stick with me. There is an important point at the end to how Gadhafi viewed the idea.
Firstly, all the interest rates in Africa would be based on the value of gold reserves held by the African Central Bank, giving our currency power and influence in global trade. This would directly influence the second economic factor of inflation in the African currency, because governments can't just print money without it being backed by gold. This solves the major problem of governments printing their currencies and puts Africans in control of our currency instead of relying on the ups and downs of the US dollar. When it comes to the third factor of stability and growth, the new African currency would be spread across multiple nations in Africa, allowing it to maintain its value in the global market despite wars in any African nations. This would benefit countries in war when it comes to rebuilding, as they could reintegrate themselves into the African currency with help from other African countries. Now let's look at growth. This is where we start to see how broken the current system is, and why Gadhafi may have had a point about us creating an African unity with our own controlled currency. In 2010, Africa had a GDP of $1.6 trillion, while the United States had a GDP of $14 trillion. By 2023, the US economy had grown to $21 trillion, whereas Africa's GDP reached $2.1 trillion. Africa's growth in exports from $600 billion in 2010 to $700 billion in 2020, while America's exports decreased from $1.8 trillion in 2010 to $1.7 trillion in 2020, but still the United States economy grew 10 times larger than that of the entire African continent. However, if Africa were united with its own currency, it could stand stronger on the global stage as a world leader. While a gold-backed currency may not work in today's global economy, however, a future where Africa unites under a technologically advanced currency is still worth considering.
While critics dismiss it as a dream, Gadhafi believed it was a transformative idea for Africa's future. Gadhafi's idea of a united Africa in a different universe outperforms our current fragmented Africa. He believed that the unity was possible and became one of the leading forces in the establishment of the African Union in 2002. With a proven track record of spearheading large movements, Gadhafi's push for a pan-African project had a high likelihood of success. Many of the Gadhafi supporters believe Gadhafi's vision for a united Africa and its currency threatened leading powers, which may have led to his downfall after he became African Union chairman, similar to his position in Libya in 1969 before he started his revolutionary changes. Many African leaders were also skeptical about Gaddafi's idea of a united Africa and questioned his motives behind the African Unity Project. They sensed Gaddafi's ambitious nature and his desire to control a centralized African government, to challenge Western dominance in Africa's affairs and aiming to establish himself as Africa's greatest figure. As a result, many leaders rightfully kept a distance from Gaddafi's ideas and what he represented. This skepticism was a significant reason why the idea of African unity never fully took off, as the motives behind Gaddafi's plans were never fully understood due to the enigmatic nature of the man himself. It leads one to speculate that if the idea had been championed by a more universal admired figure like Nelson Mandela, many African leaders would have been more likely to support it. It was during the 2000s when the world began to witness a new and changed Gaddafi. Once viewed as a villain with radical anti-Western sentiments and alleged support for terrorism, he became known as a hero who opposed terrorism, stopped Libya's nuclear development, and made friends with the West. However, he miscalculated that one does not just influence global politics without creating powerful enemies. And Gaddafi had created plenty of powerful enemies with no friends to back him. His rigid personal worldviews left him either in denial or oblivious to the growing discontent among the Libyan populace. Gaddafi had focused so much on the world's big problems that he had forgotten about the struggles of the ordinary Libyans. Just as his revolution began with a bloodless coup, his regime ended with a bloody revolution, symbolizing an end of an era. Gaddafi's death was brutal, dragged out from a hidden pipe where he sought safety, tortured by the hands of his own people. In a scene of chaos and blood, Gaddafi pleaded for mercy but faced a jury of vengeful rebels. A teenage boy delivered the final blow, sealing Gaddafi's fate. The future of Libya had passed down judgment on Gaddafi. Only those who lived through the Gaddafi era and its aftermath can truly judge whether Libya is for the better or worse after Gaddafi. Africa hopes for peace in the nation of Libya. As an outsider, my role is to reflect on the legacy of the man I have studied for the past month and give my educated opinion on his legacy based on the thorough research I've done. A man born in a harsh reality, as he found his way to power, he was convinced of his destiny and everyone around him was a tool for his needs. A character who did evil but advocated for noble ideas. If you watch till the end, I thank you.